So we now have our first plenary panel. What innovative teaching methods are business schools using to educate the workforce of the future? This session includes academic deans who will share their perspectives and creative ideas for preparing students for a constantly changing economic world. Specifically, we're going to hear from Geraldine Doyle, the Associate Dean and Director at UCD Michael Smurfit Graduate Business School, Giorgio DiGiorgio, the Deputy Rector at Lewis University, and Peter Tufano, the Dean of Said Business School at Oxford University. For our guests, please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box. We're going to try to incorporate some of your questions into the sessions. Now, to moderate this panel, I'd like to welcome our very own Dean, Donna Rapiccioli of the Gabelli School of Business at Fordham University. Dean Rapiccioli has earned a reputation for creating academic programs that emphasize applied learning, a global perspective, interdisciplinary thinking, and strong ties with industry. Her philosophy centers on business with a purpose, grounded in the Jesuit-influenced principle that commerce should advance society in a greater way. Given her perspective and experience, particularly as we've had to navigate these changes and challenges in education given the pandemic, there's no one better to moderate this first panel. I give a warm welcome to Dean Rapiccioli and look forward to hearing this discussion.
Thank you, Megan. I'm delighted to moderate this panel with my colleagues. I'll give it a moment till they can join in. Welcome.
Hello, good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Such a pleasure.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Well, I think all of you realize that it is an extraordinarily exciting time to be a business school dean. COVID-19 accelerated a lot of innovations and trends that we were already seeing. Things like schools really recognizing that business education needs to be a force for good and to emphasize purpose. Things like lifelong learning and skills development. Things like co-creating the content with our students, as well as flexibility. So I'm going to invite each of you to share how your school is implementing and adopting some of these trends or others that you choose. So I see Giorgio right now on the screen first, so I'm going to call on you, but I'm going to invite each of you to chime in. Giorgio, please.
Sure. Well, as you know, Italy was one of the first countries that was severely hit by the virus. Although being in Rome, we had the advantage of a couple of weeks of notice because they first shut down Milan and then the entire country. And actually we were able, basically from one evening to the next morning, to move completely to simultaneous online teaching. Actually, this was a sort of emergency teaching. I wouldn't call it smart teaching. But we didn't lose a single hour of lecture, and I think that all our students and all our professors did really a great job in being able to adapt to such a new world without losing any content and trying to be flexible enough, as now the world asks us to be. And clearly, I say that it was emergency teaching because I don't think that you can teach in the same way when you teach in front of your students or when you teach in front of a screen. So clearly, it takes some time. We had already, especially in the business school, we had already many courses that were already delivered online. But for most of the other professors enrolled in other schools, I'm the deputy rector of the university, and we don't have only a business school. We also have undergrads and other master's courses. It was a real challenge. So I think overall, also the professors that were a little bit less keen to use technology showed great flexibility, great effort, and they've done a good job. Now the real challenge is to understand how to best blend and mix different tools for teaching, I think they will provide us also with lots of new opportunities, not only with a challenge.
Thank you. Geraldine, do you want to jump in?
Certainly, yeah. Thank you, Giorgio. The experience we had in the UCD Smurfit School in Ireland was not dissimilar to your own in Italy. And when the pandemic struck, we were fortunate that we were on our spring break. So we had 2 weeks in which to prepare faculty, to prepare ourselves to pivot to online delivery. And as Giorgio has said, we had an incredible experience of faculty upskilling, learning new technology, putting an incredible amount of effort in to ensure that the quality of delivery and the quality of education for our students was as good as it could be given the circumstances. So it was an incredible experience of what I would say the community of faculty and staff who came together to work so hard to ensure that the student experience would be as good as it could possibly be. So it was, I think it was a very, it was very exciting. It was nerve-wracking. We felt like we were on a roller coaster. But one of the things that was so positive was that experience of the community within the business school, the community within the wider university, and that very strong culture of teaming, which really came to the fore. So that was really heartening.
Peter?
Great. Well, first of all, congratulations on 100 years. That's a fabulous accomplishment, and thank you for inviting me. I was looking forward to going to London to your new facilities, but I'm speaking here from Oxford in the UK. I won't repeat what Giorgio and Geraldine spoke about, but I want to kind of focus on the other element. Of course, job one was getting everybody safe, and job two was making sure that the show went on the road, that the teaching went on. But we quickly focused on what you talked about, Donna, which is purpose. We have, like you, have talked about purpose as the center animating force of our school. And when COVID-19 hit, how would we demonstrate that that was what we were all about, or was it false words? So after we got everybody safe and after we got our teaching back online, I just basically challenged our entire community. If we've been speaking these words, how are we going to demonstrate to the world we really mean them? And so what I'm very proud that we did is that 3 or 4 things. First, my entrepreneurship colleagues leapt to action. We created Creative Instruction Lab Recovery, where we're working with more than 100 firms around the globe in conjunction with 7 other universities to try to supercharge COVID recovery efforts that would include testing, new kinds of diagnostics, as well as other things. Then we created the Libre Project, where we were supporting small to medium-sized enterprises in the UK that were hard hit by COVID. Then we created the COVID Rapid Solution Builder, which is an international initiative to support firms, again, that were battling COVID. So on the entrepreneurship front, we kind of doubled down. And then we decided that we needed to take our own medicine. We had shut our buildings, including our residential executive education facility. We decided that we would turn it over to the homeless. Oxford has a large homeless population, and in the middle of the pandemic and the lockdown, the city was desperate to find housing for them. And it wasn't the easiest decision. We actually turned our executive education facilities over to the homeless for 3 or 4 months. Then we decided that it was important for students to think through what their values were. At a Jesuit-based school like Fordham, you know, maybe there's more commonality, but at Oxford, which has an 800-year history, there's no single tradition. And so we partnered quickly with the Aspen Institute to create a program so that students can have intimate conversations anchored around primary readings and art and other things that really got them to open up to what was going on in the world and how that related to them. Then our students, like many of your students, were disillusioned about their futures and about their job prospects and more. And so we set up something called the Dean's Response Fund and something called the Oxford Said Service Corps, where we actually paid students the living wage. And you don't usually think of the words living wage and MBAs in the same sentence, to work with nonprofits who, like the other organizations we talked to, had important missions. So to us, it was an important time to really recommit to this notion of purpose. One of the most famous Oxonians, Adam Smith, had written obviously The Wealth of Nations in 1776, but in 1759, he wrote a book called Theory of Moral Sentiments. And in that, he lays out our obligations to one another. And I'd like to think that what we did within weeks of the pandemic hitting was to just try to make sure that we were mindful of that and that we leapt into action.
Thank you so much. And your actions really link to what so many business schools are doing around allowing students to be co-creators of knowledge and co-creators of their experience. I wonder if Geraldine or Giorgio want to share something that they've done at their school that is innovative, and it may not have to do with COVID, but perhaps it does. Please share something innovative that we can all learn from.
Some projects that we started, actually our rector started, was to organize what he called master classes that were meeting done by having one leading academic, either from Lewis or from some other universities in the world, and discussing a big item under interdisciplinary perspectives with a representative from the business world or from an institution or from some international organization. And this was done with great intensity. We had like 25 master classes. Students were very interested in these activities that were complementing their normal courses. And also during the normal courses, we had the opportunity to invite representatives from corporations, from organizations, or even other colleagues from other universities to participate. So to try to enlarge the possibility of students to get lessons also from people that are not usually Lewis faculty. I think this is an opportunity that we can exploit also in research, and the research networks are enlarging a lot via this possibility.
And just to add to that, some of the things that we did during the COVID period and some new initiatives that we had introduced indeed before that was an Impact Maker speaker series where we invited many of our alumni and leaders within business to talk about leadership through adversity, leadership through crisis. And these were additional supports and webinars for our students so that they could still feel a part of the community and still feel connected with us as a school. And we reached out to alumni and we had a call to action for our alumni. And the response from our alumni was just incredible over the summer months, giving of their time doing podcasts, talking about lessons in leadership from their particular experience in their particular sector. And then also reassuring our students that there would be employment prospects when they graduate this autumn. And that was something also that was really inspiring, was we were anticipating that maybe many of the corporates who had planned internships for our students, that they might fall by the wayside during the first phase of the pandemic. But much to our surprise and delight, they didn't. They still honor their commitments for those internships. And I suppose that's something that's been important in recent years, is the growing importance of embedding internships and embedding that link between theory and practice into our curriculum and into our programs. So that's very much a part of what we do in all of our programs. In that context, also two recent initiatives that we've introduced for our students that are co-curricular activities include what we call a global leadership program. And this global leadership program has 3 different pillars designed for students to create their own tailor-made development around their own personal leadership and organizational leadership. So that's something that our students have signed up to, and it's a highly competitive program. So students have to go through an application process, and we piloted last year, and it's in full swing now, I have to say, in the new academic year. And very much one component of that is surrounding intercultural competence. And we see that for our students, having a global mindset and to be impactful leaders wherever they work globally, is that they really need to have that in-depth understanding of working with colleagues in teams from different cultures. So we have an expert, one of our colleagues is an expert in intercultural competence, and she's developed a whole program for our students surrounding that. And the number of students, Irish international students, signing up for that, and the diversity of students in both the intercultural competence program and the global leadership program is really inspiring. And that our students are so willing, they're hungry and they're thirsty to engage in these co-curricular activities for their development as future leaders.
Thanks, Geraldine. No, these are all great points that, you know, a business school education is much broader than what happens in the classroom. And having these real life examples where they can help the community. At Fordham, many of our students are supporting the local Bronx community businesses as they get revitalized after some of the challenges that they faced. And those are the best learning experiences. But I want to shift, as an accounting professor, one of the things that I realize is that many of the most important things are very hard to measure. And I'm curious as to how you go about measuring impact. Everything that you've all shared, you know, it sounds amazing. And I'm curious, how do you track the impact that programs and some of these initiatives are having? I'll start with you, Peter.
Sure. So, you know, there's the old saw that you manage what you measure, and it's definitely true. And the problem with impact is most of the impact work that we see is very, very long-tailed. And so, you know, it's about tracking alumni. It's about seeing what kinds of things they did. In the UK, there's a thing called the Research Excellence Framework, or REF. There, we institutionally are required each 5 years to put together a set of case studies where we say, what's the direct link between the work that we do and an outcome in the world, where we need testimonials and data to do that. So we're quite formal about that. On the research front, actually, I think we can measure impact. In fact, one of the things that we've done under my deanship is to make impact one of the tenure standards. Often it's about research and teaching and citizenship, and we've added impact for the moment as something that's, I would say, optional. So we will consider it. We're not going to require somebody after 5 or 7 years to demonstrate impact. But if they have had impact, we will take that into account explicitly in part of our tenure standards. But back to the measurement question, I think it's really, really tough. You know, so we're looking at these metrics right now, direct metrics, you know, for example, carbon neutrality. You know, what's the position of the school with respect to carbon neutrality? That's not impact of us. It's our impact on the world in that sense. But, you know, many of these things just are long-term measures. Now, what you see, you know, traditionally is that the measures are things like, how many businesses did my graduates create? What's the net wealth creation in terms of shareholder value? What's employment? And those are, I think, reasonable metrics. And if you look at DealBook and some other places like that, you'll see metrics like that. But what they fall short of is, to the extent that our ideas or our alumni have helped change, you know, for example, we're working in COP26, and we have an agenda around youth, bringing youth to COP26. You know, how do you measure that? I know I sound like I'm fudging a little bit, Donna. I think these measures are incredibly tough because they are long-tailed in nature, they're long horizon in nature, and their impacts in a systemic way. If you want to change systems, you're going to have to work with others. So disentangling your specific impact as opposed to you're part of a system that's changing the world is particularly difficult.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's about creating a baseline and just seeing how you're moving along that trajectory. Geraldine, why don't you jump in here?
Yes, I agree with Peter. This is something that is very difficult to measure, and really in terms of impact of all that we try to do in terms of ensuring that our students will be impactful and will contribute to this society, you know, or the business sector that they choose is very difficult, but it's a long-term game. So I think one of the ways that we can measure it, however, in a more short-term way, is the willingness of our alumni to return to help out, to come back, to be mentors. So we have a mentoring system for both our undergraduate and our postgraduate business students, and the willingness of our alumni to come back and to support our young students is just incredible. And during the pandemic, when we had that call to action for our alumni, again, that was another example, which is measurable in a way in terms of that willingness. Nobody said no. People, you know, were volunteering. What can we do to help? And giving of their time so graciously and so generously. So yeah, so I think it is difficult, but I think maybe that's one way in which we can measure what we do and the impact that what we do. And Peter, you talk about impact in terms of research. And as researchers, we love bringing our research into the classroom. So I think also as much as possible as we can bring our research and our research that is impactful, if we can bring that into our curriculum and into our teaching as much as possible, you know, I think that's something that we can measure as well. So for example, in recent years, we've introduced, and talking about being carbon neutral and striving. I saw Airbus this week have announced their 3 concept aircraft, which are striving to be zero carbon emissions. So we launched a new program a couple of years ago, which is a finance program, but it's surrounding renewable energy and environmental finance. And that's, you know, an example of how some of our faculty researching in that particular area of finance, we've created that new program in the hope then that our graduates will be impactful in terms of reaching and striving towards reducing our carbon emissions. Yeah. And another example, I suppose, Donna, is about 3 or 4 years ago as well, we created a new chair in the business school, and that chair is a chair in business and society. So my colleague who holds that chair is responsible for ensuring that not only our research but our teaching is very much intertwined in thinking about and addressing our global societal challenges. And in that regard, I think in terms of business education now and into the future, the importance of, and Megan mentioned it in introducing you, Donna, the importance of interdisciplinarity, of multidisciplinary thinking, of cross-disciplinary thinking, and no more so than during the pandemic, we have realized the importance of bringing experts together to, from a variety of different disciplines, to solve the problem that is the pandemic and other problems, future pandemics or crises. And I think that's really important for our students to instill that interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary thinking into their studies with us.
It's so important when you have complex problems that the only way to approach them really is to take an interdisciplinary and a cross-system approach. I totally agree. Georgia, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, sure. We started to have a very broad approach towards interdisciplinarity many years ago. Actually, we talk about large learning, not only lifelong learning, large learning, meaning that we try to expose our students to a set of experiences that would help them to become better citizens in our society. That is, we ask them to choose between a wide set of different initiatives that go from working on the garden and try to raise up something together with people in the area of the in the zone, in the area of the university that have problems, or to go and help the volunteers in hosting and welcoming the migrants, or to go and talk and teach to people that are in jail. I mean, we ask students to do these activities, and they actually have to gain some credits in doing such activities. So the idea is that we all remember that 2019, that seems so far away, was the year of the environment, was the year of Greta, was the year of the Sustainable Development Goals. I think that this also provides us with a set of well-defined objectives that we all wish to pursue as organizations, as individuals, as society. And there are some new tools derived by the digital world, some platforms, in which you can actually try to measure and also to certify quantify what is the individual commitment, the individual result in contributing to each of these sustainable development goals. And of course, if you apply it to the set of students and teachers of one university, you can also try to measure the impact of your organization. I think that this kind of attention to such important issues will be keen also to educate the leaders of tomorrow. I'm sure that in 10 years' time, when one student, one former student will apply to become managing director of a big company, they will ask him to prove his social CV also, not only his hard skills, competences in law, economics, management, or health, but also what have you done to contribute to our SDGs.
Excellent. No, I completely agree. So we just have a little bit of time left, and I thought that I would turn to some of the audience questions. And there's a question from Fang Wan about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and what are some of the initiatives that are occurring at your school, and how are you measuring the impact of these equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives? Anybody want to start on that one?
I'm happy to start if that's okay. So we have the kind of luxury of being a global school, so we have students from all over the world. But having said that, when I arrived, it wasn't mindfully global, and some of this equity and diversity has to be mindful. So at the time that I arrived, for example, 10 years ago, we had about 27% of our students who were women. This year it'll be 47%. That's not an accident. You actually have to work pretty hard at that. 10 years ago, we had about 2% of our class from Africa. That's actually the global average, Donna, and I sit on the GMAC board, and if you look at the GMAC data, around 1.7% of GMAC applicants or test takers are Africans. If you look at the world 25 years from now, there's no way that 2% of the world's managers and leaders are going to be Africans. We said we'd be at 10%, and we've been there for more than the last 5 years. This year, I think we could be at 13%. So the first thing is we actually have to set goals, and it goes back to the former question, Donna. Some of this is actually setting, they're not quotas, they're ambitions, and then working hard on the recruiting front to make those ambitions reality. Secondly, in the wake of the George Floyd murder, my community, as with many others, I wouldn't say came awake to, because I think they were awake the whole time, but it was the Black Lives Matter movement, or in this country, the decolonization or Rhodes Must Fall movements became very strong. And to me, what was most heartening is I went to my community and I said, what are we going to do about this? 65 people volunteered, and this was in the beginning of this July. And I said, I'd like a set of recommendations by September 15th. And from July 15th to September 15th, 65 people worked together. I have a set of 50 recommendations now that we have to sift through, because what's very clear is that their lived experiences as students, as alumni, as staff, as faculty, of being whichever parts of groups they identify with, I can't ever appreciate what they've gone through. And now we're sifting through those probably 10 years worth of recommendations to figure out which ones can we implement. So these are two different approaches. One is a top-down, set strategy, set targets, and then keep people accountable. The other is bottom-up, listen to the experiences of people and let them tell you what it is that they need you to be an ally about. And for us, those have been the most important things.
I completely agree. I think we need both approaches, and our schools are doing that, and listening to the community is really gonna allow us to make significant progress. I don't know, Giorgio or Geraldine, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, absolutely. Go
Please,
ahead, Giorgio.
After Geraldine, women first.
Yeah, so both, I suppose, at the student level and at the staff and faculty level, we've been working very hard in terms of diversity and inclusion and equality. And at the student level, I suppose, if we looked at our school 15, 20 years ago, we would have been probably 95% domestic students, Irish students. The composition of our students today is 50% Irish students. We then have probably 10% from the US, which we want to grow, other students from Europe, India and China, Africa. We have some students from all over the world. So to see the transformation in the composition of our student makeup is really exciting. It's really exciting for our students, and particularly in this global world where students need to have that experience in the classroom, first of all, of that diversification before they then go into the world of employment and into the labour market. And in terms of equality, diversity and inclusion, I think, you know, every university at the university level, but also at the school level, we have very clear structures in terms of promoting the philosophy and a culture of equality, diversity and inclusion. So within our school, for example, we have a colleague who is our representative, representing what we do surrounding equality, diversity and inclusion at the university level. So we have a team of volunteers, of faculty and whose staff who volunteer to be part of this committee, and they work on things from, you know, the student composition, staff composition, but also things like having facilities for students, or for, you know, our MBA students, as executive MBA students who are mums, who might need to be feeding their children in between class. So you know, room where mums can go to nurse their babies. So it's really diverse in terms of what is involved in equality, diversity and inclusion. So the whole basket of activities are really important to foster that sense of inclusion and diversity.
Giorgio.
Yeah, just want to add that you can have some dedicated action, like scholarships that are dedicated to people coming from certain areas or from certain nationalities. But then I believe that what really makes inclusion and diversity a feature of a university is to have our teaching and our teaching mission be contaminated by research, because research is global, is inclusive, is international. And when you link in a research university professors that come from everywhere in the world with different degrees and different expertise, and they are successful researchers, then they are going to attract programs of exchanges, students coming and being willing to study in your university. So I think that research and teaching have to go always and in an increasing way together. And this is going to lead to a university that is very inclusive and totally respectful of diversity.
Well, thank you all. Oh, go ahead, please, Georgine.
Yeah, I was just going to come back and just add on to that. And Peter alluded to, you know, the mix of male and female students within our programs. And that has certainly been something that we're working very hard on in terms of increasing the number of female students on our MBA programs in particular. We don't have that problem on some of our, you know, digital marketing programs or finance programs or international management. But it is something that we do experience, particularly on the MBA program. So for example, next month we're hosting a dedicated webinar for women in the MBA program, where we will showcase, you know, alumni and as role models of our MBA program, and reassure other women that they are as equally capable as anybody else of completing the MBA program with huge success. So it is something I think that we all have to work on. And Peter, as you say, it's something that you have to measure, and you have to have a strategy and a plan to achieve that. Yeah.
And to hold people accountable. I completely agree. Well, I have to say, I totally enjoyed this conversation. I wish it could go on even longer. And I'm leaving with even more hope than I entered. I truly believe that when you look at our schools and our partnerships, that we are educating students who will change the world in a positive way. So I look forward to continuing our conversation in the future. And I really look forward to welcome you to the London Center at some point very soon. So thank you again, and I'm going to turn it back over to Megan.
Thank you.
Ciao. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter and Geraldine. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.